I can tell you why they're
exactly
doing
why
it.
we're not ready for it, because we're still doing.
I can
shit
tell you
like
exactly
that.
why they're doing it. Consciousness, like anything else, is neutral. So you can. It's like water.
That
you
ain't
can,
neutral.
You can drink the water, get somebody to stop dying from thirst, or you can drown someone in it. So you get consciousness. So the Canadians discovered, they're told by the Americans that probably because they had a live alien that was talking in people's heads, they knew that consciousness was involved. So you can do one of two things. You can either use it for good, or you can do what the U.S. military and the U.S. intelligence does, because they believe in separation. There's bad Russians, and there's bad Chinese, and there's bad Mexicans, and everybody's out to get us. Even Canadians were labeled by Donald Trump. We're a threat to national security. And it's like a million enemies. That's our job. If you take a look, I'm doing a show, not next week, the week after, an election show. I'm going to have the guy who asked Hillary Clinton the question, and we're going to be talking about this idea. Reid has now come out, and Senator Reid, on this whole thing. And there's these rumors that they have been given, the UFO people have been given $500,000 for UFO research. And Reid was the guy that was pushing this whole thing. And it's basically now been confirmed in an article that was written today by Nick Pope that the Senate and the House Armed Services Committee are looking at the UFO thing. So why are they doing it? Because they're into the separation. They're armed services. We're the good guys on Earth, and we have these things. And Reid said, we've got to get it. I am telling you that the Russians and the Chinese are working on this technology, and if they get it, they're the bad guys. They're gonna get us, and we've got to figure this thing out. And so they're doing all the testing, and they're giving all this money to try to get the technology. So the question is, what is the U.S. military going to do with this technology? If you say you have these kids that were put, like Whitley talks about, yes, there are bad things. There was also 2 atomic bombs that were dropped. 150,000 people melted into the sidewalk, innocent civilians. It doesn't get much eviler than that. And what was the explanation by the New York Times, the science reporter? They had it coming. We had Madeleine Albright, 1996. On YouTube, you can watch her actually admit that the U.S. lead embargo on Iraq in the early 1990s led to the death of 500,000 children. It doesn't get much eviler than that. Yes, people are doing very evil things. It comes down to separation. It comes down to the U.S. military, who believes we are the God's chosen race, and we have to protect the American people, and the ends justifies the means. And if we have to go out and drop some atomic bombs, if we have to kill people, they dropped the atomic bomb. For example, in World War II, they dropped it at 1,500 feet. The calculation was done by John von Neumann. They didn't have computers at the time. John von Neumann was this mathematical, brilliant guy. And why did they drop it at 1,500 feet? Because it actually created the most damage. There's documents that have now been released about them threatening they were going to use nuclear weapons in North Vietnam, about the fact that since World War II, the policy has been to drop the bombs on civilians because it terrorizes the civilians, and it makes the civilians stop the government from doing stuff. This is a policy. This is military policy, but the military policy is based on separation. It's us versus them, and we are here to protect the American people, and that's why you get just really ugly, evil things, not just a couple of little kids in a box. That's why they went into MK Ultra, because they wanted to learn weapons. Man, if we could use this, we could really do some damage. We can effectively kill people better, faster, and save the good people on Earth that are all perfect. It's this separation. We're the good guys. We're the American military. The ends justifies the means. And if we have to kill, like Donald Trump, he talks about North Korea, we are going to, if it comes down to it, we will destroy the entire country. That's 25 million people. When you get that kind of stuff, it's the same thing. It's this belief in separation. If you really believe that everything is one, you cannot do this kind of stuff.
So let's get back to the Clinton question that you're talking about and the Harry Reid $500,000. So
Yeah.
how does that fit into your view of
well,
this?
Reid, this is how they're getting the money. So they're calling it the Advanced Aviation or Aerospace, depending, Threat Identification Program. Before Leslie Kean was using it, they said that before this started, they were saying, oh, we've got to look into UFOs because it may be a threat to airliners. And I guess nobody believed that. And then he said it was a threat because they were interfering with our nuclear weapons. Look at these bad guys. They're interfering with our nuclear weapons, which when I said, if shutting down nuclear weapons, he's just giving them the Nobel Prize for the next 20 years. That's the best thing that ever happened. And so it's this idea that the aliens are a threat and we have to put the money. So if you go into the U.S. government and you say, oh, these aliens, they're good people, they want to help us, they're going to go, get out of here. We're not interested. You create a need and then fill it. You say, these guys are here. The Russians are going to get the technology. They're going to kill us with technology. The Chinese are going to kill us with technology. The aliens are bad guys. We don't know for sure, but they could destroy us. We have to get this. And the U.S. military, that's their job. So they're going to put in $500,000, say, yeah, the threat is there. We have to protect the threat. And then we're going to put the money into the thing. If there was no threat on this whole thing with the To the Stars thing, there would be no money. That's why they're calling it a threat, because you have to have an enemy. You have to have a separation. If there's no separation, nobody's giving you any money.
There you have it.
Yeah, that's a good point. But
So here's my theory, is that we got these aliens. The crafts are controlled by consciousness, clearly. We got these humans who can't get our shit together enough to even be truthful with ourselves half the time. So we have to hire these shrinks to have any sort of intimate connection so we can tell, because we don't even have a friend we want to tell our shit to, let alone live with it. So we're just stuck in this self-replicating fucking loop of reincarnation until we get our shit together enough that we can go off planet by manipulating consciousness or however the fuck you do it. And that's why the aliens are nice, because they got their shit together. Solved.
and my latest theory, I did, Alex saw the lecture, I gave my latest theory where I basically say, if the aliens wanted to tell us, or if they're aliens, I mean, the more I look at it, the more I go to the Jacques Vallée thing where, it used to be spirits and leprechauns and stuff like that. And it seems to be manifesting depending upon what societal beliefs we have. I basically look at it and say, they're not doing anything. They're just playing games. They're doing the trickster thing. They're dropping metal, different pieces of metal, and saying, hey, give them this piece of metal and make them think. That's all they're doing. They're making us think. They're not trying to take over. They're not trying to, steal our gold or any of that kind of stuff. To me, the more I look at it, the more it's just like they're just trying to raise consciousness. Put on a crop circle. Let's put this crop circle and make them think. And everybody's going, whoa, what's this going on here? And just drop this piece of metal and it's got screw around with the isotopes and then you get the higher stuff where you start getting the messages that they're giving us. And that's where we get into what we started with, is this idea that, 75% of all the experiencers in this survey believe that reincarnation is involved. And they're getting this based upon this experience encounter with beings. 37% have had near-death experiences. That's that's 7 times the national average. And I remember Free, when they first got this stat, the 37% have near-death experiences, they're going and they're saying, we got to have a committee. We got to figure out why is this happening? How could you possibly have all these experiencers and they have such a high percentage of near-death experiences? And I'm saying, because you believe it's a random world. If I can predict that you're going to have a car accident tomorrow, it's not as random as you think it is. And the possibility is that it's not random. The fact that you're an experiencer is because you chose to be an experiencer. And the fact that you have a near-death experience is because you chose to have a near-death experience. You're assuming these are random events. They're not random events. And you get this thing, the highest beings was the energy being, 53% there's telepathic messages, including a vision. 81% of all experiences have out-of-body experiences. 45% say that they've had an encounter, they've been brought into what they refer to like a spirit world.
What percent have had a MyLab experience? 35%.
How many?
I got it right here. And it's overrepresentative of the most traumatic experiences they've had.
Okay, so who's doing the MyLab events?
Well, I think Whitley just kind of laid out a pretty good profile of the involvement in that. So I'm not disagreeing with the overall message that you're saying. I guess I'm trying to refine it, and I'm trying to ask the follow-up question is, okay, I understand you're in the battleground of moving people away from the evil alien abduction thing. Fine. I just want to make sure as we take that step, we don't step over some stuff that we might want to pay attention to. And such as why they did that. What are they doing with the MyLab stuff? What are they trying to accomplish? And you can't just keep saying that separation. I get that. I'm non-dual. I'm non-dual. Graham's non-dual. We both do meditation all the time. I am totally into the secret of the ascent is to always look up. Believe me, I'm a freaking yogi, totally committed to that. But I'm also a real person who lives in this world and makes decisions about what I support and where I draw the line. And this is something I think we have to be clear about in terms of saying we just should not tolerate that. We should be very, very upset about people doing, our government messing around with this extended consciousness realm in this way in an attempt to weaponize it. And I'm tired of just keep saying, well, it's all separation. Well, the whole frickin' world is separation.
Exactly. And that's the problem that you
that doesn't get us anywhere.
But that's the thing. You've got a $700 some odd billion defense budget, and you have this belief in separation. It's more prominent now. Get out of the politics. Who cares? Do you want to be in CHICOM? You want to go over there and be on a death van in China? I don't. So, we can compare different things and this one versus that.
Yeah, but it's beyond the local government and your national government. It's an elite group of people flying around in this technology. Whether ET exists or not, somebody's flying around in high technology that we don't have access to. So who's flying around in all the big black triangles? That's not just me and my consciousness.
Hey, this is a major question I wanted to ask Grant, and that's secret space program. Very popular with a lot of folks out there. Joseph Farrell, Richard Dolan, definitely. They make a strong case for it. David Schrott. I gave these guys the thing there. I mean, you have a different perspective on it. I thought you had a great counter perspective on it. Let's talk about Graham's point there. Who's flying these things around? Is it us? Is it secret space program? Is it,
as I pointed out, if you take a look, now we're into the triangles, but it started as wooden ships with propellers and guys hanging off ropes. Then it went to these Foo Fighter things for a couple of years where they're on the edges of planes and they're flying along. And then it was the green fireballs over top of the nuclear stuff where we're doing all the nuclear tests and building the atomic bombs.
Yeah, and then it goes there's planes up there. We do have planes, right? We do have technology. We do have stuff that flies. So we're asking, is this stuff that we see that's flying as a triangle, have we made it? Have we made it out and tested it out in the lab and tested out in the desert of Nevada? That's a real question. You can't just say flying ships and big sails and all the rest of that. 747s fly. Do triangles fly?
But is a triangle actually whether it's the U.S. military or whether it is alien beings? Do you need a craft that's 1 mile wide to fly 100 feet over the ground in Phoenix? The triangles have only appeared the last couple of years. It's the predominant sighting, but it wasn't the most predominant sighting now. It's like these things are changing. They're changing. They used to have like ships with windows. You don't really get those reports anymore. You have landing traces. That doesn't happen for 20 years. It's like, so
you're saying no secret space program. That's okay.
I'm saying the more I look at it, the more I doubt the secret space program. I'll give you some reasons why. Because I asked Chris Bledsoe, who is very good friends with Jim Semivan, who's the guy that runs To the Stars. And I said, Chris, I need you to ask, do they have this high tech stuff? And he asked and he said, no, we have high tech. We don't have that stuff. Basically, I looked at and I said, if they have this high tech stuff, then why is Bob Bigelow, a billionaire, still doing the rocket thing and doing the thing of building little pod things that are going to be put on added to space stations and stuff? Because that's where the money is. Even Elon Musk is going to use rockets to go to Mars. That's 4,000-year-old technology. I don't see anything. I think that these high money people, Joe Firmage, who spent $100 billion, is working on this box thing that's trying to levitate this thing off the ground by 1 inch. Well, why are him and Bigelow and all these people doing this super, like, basically can't get something to levitate off the ground when all this secret space program stuff, they've got the money, they've got the access. Firmage, I asked question of Firmage. And the thing was, he has all these contacts inside intelligence, inside the government. So why are they wasting their time with this very minor stuff? And I think that a lot of the secret space program thing is just military bravado. We got all this stuff. We've got, we're going to other star systems. We're trading with other people and all this kind of stuff. And in the end, basically, you can't get off the ground. You can't get to the space station. You got to go on Russian rockets. And the reason you go on Russian rockets is because the American rockets that were taken out of service that had the nuclear weapons on them were driven over, according to Bigelow, by front-end loaders, because you didn't want to compete with the new rockets that were coming out, so they were not allowed. So you have Bigelow using Russian rockets. You have no space program. You have basically none of the stuff. And the more I look at it, the more I think that it's just bravado. It's just stories that are thrown in there to throw people off. I leave myself open to someone actually showing me. I remember there was a guy, I was in Ireland, and there was a guy who ran the King's Observatory, and he had developed this technology where he was able to take a microwave tower from 10 miles away, and it looked like he was standing right beside it. And in the middle of the night, in the dark, he could photograph this microwave tower in the dark, and in color, it would be like 2 miles away. And he was selling this technology to the U.S. military. So I said to him, if there was secret space, and this many years ago, if there was these secret big crafts that were flying around, would you be able to see the craft? He said, if that stuff is up there, I could see the rivets on it. And so I started asking people. I said, okay, if these crafts are flying around, give me the location. I got a guy in Ireland who's got the technology, and nobody would ever provide me the location of where these things are. I think it falls apart when you start looking at the amount of money that people are putting in this thing. CIA, Ron Pandolfi, all these guys, and they don't seem to be getting anywhere. And the one quote that you guys have sent me, this thing about Ben Rich, I recovered some documents, and I haven't put them out yet. There was a guy doing a manuscript on an eyes-only study for President Johnson. The guy that was involved in the study was a guy by the name of Arthur Lundahl, who is the equivalent to Ron Pandolfi, Kit Green, all these people that are running the CIA UFO program, the remote viewing program, all this sort of stuff. They are the head guy. And at that point, they said they had discovered nothing. And this was an eyes-only study. They couldn't get anywhere. And you get Eric Davis, who's saying 1989, they shut down they have crashed saucers. They had a crash saucer program. And that's Eric Davis, who is a contractor, who I knew Eric Davis for many years. And he's got some weird characteristics, but he's not a liar. And he said that they shut the crash saucer program down in 1989 because they couldn't get anywhere. That's the experience that I get when I talk to people like Chris Bledsoe, who talk about the fact that you go into the ship and you put your hand on a pad and suddenly you can go whatever you think is where you go. Or a guy that tells me, a Mormon guy who flew the craft out of Utah, who tells me he's on there and where do you want to go? I want to see the Milky Way from a distance away in space. And it's 2 seconds, he said. In 2 seconds, he was there. We do not have this technology. Chris Bledsoe talks about, you go into the craft. The craft looks like it's about 10 or 12 feet across. You go inside the craft and it's like 50 feet across. And you look outside the craft and it's 10 or 12 feet. You look inside, it's 50 feet. I don't care what anybody says. We do not have this technology. I think it's all just this sort of military bravado. When you come down to it, we have high-tech planes. We have all this kind of stuff. And even the high-tech planes. Now the F-35 has been grounded because, it had a crash. Or the people will talk to me about, the government's doing the cattle mutilations. I said, really? We had the SEAL Team 6, the top guys who trained for months to go in and get bin Laden. They had stealth helicopters. They turned the lights off and they crashed a helicopter. We went to rescue the Iranian hostages. We crashed helicopters. We in Somalia, we crashed helicopters. And then people say, oh no, the government is going in, 10,000 cattle mutilations, and they were able to do this for 40 years and never crash a helicopter. I think that a lot of the stuff that's out there is just not true, that they do not have this kind of technology they want you to think, because what they're doing is they're throwing garbage into the field. So you and I sit there and argue and we don't know. And somebody says the secret space program exists. I say it doesn't. And we end up fighting with each other. And meanwhile, the story that they want out is put out. It's all counterintelligence. There's more money, according to some stories, spent on classification to protect the program than on the program. They're good at this. They're good at throwing these bizarre stories and counterintelligence operations that they run to protect what they're doing. But I simply do not believe, the more I look at it, I mean, I used to believe that they did have the secret space program because Ben Rich had said, and that was part of my download. Ben Rich said, we've got the technology to take ET home. We've discovered the mistake in the equation. And now Hal Puthoff is saying that he's discovered the mistake in the equation. He now has the technology, but they haven't built anything. And they actually talk about this terahertz energy that they're going to bombard this layered piece. But Hal Puthoff has admitted that they do not have a terahertz generator sufficient that can produce sufficient energy to bombard that piece of equipment. So every road that I've taken, it appears that no, we're making a lot of claims, but no, this technology is way beyond anything that we have.
I don't know. I mean, I still would like to speculate on what then that is, because the black triangle thing it's just a good example. There's all kinds of different shapes and craft that are seen out there. But I mean, the black triangle one is the one that I know enough people personally that have seen that themselves. So then if you're not sure about ETs and that they're flying these things around and you don't think that we have the technology on Earth, there's not a lot of different. I mean, what's left? I mean, it just seems like, what's that? Manifestation.
Or maybe a triangle just isn't that great. It's just like shitty Earth tech. It looks good.
Well, that's
but
what
it's
I
really,
saw triangle.
it's really just
beyond
some
the Texas
inflatable
grants.
piece of shit.
Yeah, but that's beyond the technology
it's
that
like
Grant's
the
talking
F-36.
about. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a triangle in '76, and it looked completely different. And it was 100 feet above the car. It was either 100 feet above the car, or it was very big. I mean, it was when I looked up with the binoculars, it was the entire field of vision of a triangle. And so I'm not denying that triangles exist or that aliens are flying. But you take a look at the crafts. I mean, and this is one of the points I make in this whole thing, that it may be just a game. Like, why do you keep changing the crafts? It changes from year to year. There's different types of crafts. John Lennon's craft.
Because our cars change. Our cars change. Everything changes.
Maybe you have
to
because
it's John Lennon. Let me ask you about the John Lennon thing. So he has the white lights alternating, flick, flick, flick. These white lights along the edge of the craft, and then a red light on top. So is the statement that we need white lights flashing off and on to go through interstellar space? Why do UFOs have lights on them? And they're all different types.
Because some people have funky lights on their cars. I just saw people snowboarding with lights on their snowboards. I mean,
can't trust John Lennon.
Everybody changes it. Why can't they change their design depending on what trip they're making?
Why would they even have lights?
Well, maybe that's because.
Well, why does he just do stealth like they're doing the abduction? Nobody sees them when they're abducting people.
Because the same reason we put lights on, so people can see you, or so you can
exactly so you can see the craft. That's exactly why they put lights. That's the whole point, is that they want you to see it, and when you see it, then you're part of the game. They want you to tell the story. That's all they're doing. And all these crafts look different. The lights all look different. I mean, I even saw ones in '75 where it was one object and it changed into another object. Yeah. And so the whole deal is, we sort of have this thing where it's solid, it's a thing, but what you see, I've been in it so long that I know that the pattern keeps changing. That now
maybe it has to,
like
though.
Angel hair.
Maybe
Angel hair doesn't exist anymore. Or the whole idea where
the landing traces are less now.
Landing traces, or people seeing windows in crafts. Aliens that come down and tell some guy to get a pail of water, the trickster thing, like at the Skinwalker Ranch. So why are they doing this? The woman comes home, takes all the groceries. She takes the groceries out and puts them on the counter. She goes to the next room. She comes back and all the groceries are back in the bag. To me, it's just like they're playing like the game of trying to make us think, the breadcrumb thing. And the government's doing the same thing. It's almost like they've learned the same game. Is you're doing it gradually. You're mixing it up with a bunch of stuff, because either side, whether it's the government.
But wait a minute. If they're mixing it up with a bunch of stuff, doesn't that imply that there's some real stuff? I mean, that's just that. I mean, there's no argument that the screen memory and that consciousness is much more flexible than this. But when you go out to the airport and you get in a plane, it basically works. It takes off from one place, it lands in another place.
Yep.
And now Elon is telling us, oh, I can speed that up. I'm going to do it with these hokey rockets, but I'm still going to be able to get you from New York to Shanghai in 39 minutes. And that's going to be a great business. So there's a reality to this that we can't just blow past. I mean, that's back to my thing of consensus reality. So when a lot of people will point to Bob Lazar and say, there he is. And you had a good point. I want you to tell the story of what you think about, Bob Lazar and John Lear, Area 51, and they're out there and he says, come out, I'll show you. I'm working at Area 51. If we show up at this time, you'll see we're testing these craft, and they show up at that time, and there are the craft and all the rest of that. So again, there's a consensus reality to it of craft that fly. And it seems like you're kind of mixing that with the consciousness stuff in a way that kind of we can't completely do there.
I think you kind of can, though.
I've actually seen the craft change from one craft to another. I've seen it with my own eyes. So, and that was back in the 1970s.
I'm not denying that. I'm not saying that. I'm not denying.
So there is a physical type of shift, but whether theirs is like that, whether theirs is this one model, and it does come into the physical reality. They can move into our dark part of the thing. They can manifest as a physical being or as a physical craft, but they can also disappear. They can also turn into a ball of light and disappear. So the question is it actually a physical thing, or can they just come in, manifest as a physical being, but they're not really in this world? They can come in, and we think we're stuck in this world. That's all there is this physical world. We can do the same thing if we understand how it works.
Well, yeah.
Bob Lazar.
If you think like,
do your thing on Bob Lazar.
Well, the Bob Lazar, I would correct the thing where they said he saw the ship flying around. They saw lights. So Bob Lazar, now that's the whole thing about how it was all just a game, because Bob Lazar, when he did the interview to go on to Area 51, he had 3 interviews with EG&G, and Knapp confirms this. The first question in the second interview was, what's your relationship to John Lear, and what do you think about him? So before they actually put him on Area 51, they knew that he knew John Lear. And John Lear was putting out all the weird stuff. The Dulce base, alien big shootout, 64 special forces killed. Don't go to the light when you die. The aliens are going to take your soul and take it to the moon. John Lear had some really wild stories that he was telling. And so what they wanted is the story, according to my version of the thing. They knew that Lazar knew John Lear. And they knew that if they put him on the base, he would go and tell John Lear the whole story, and John Lear would put it out. And because John Lear had all these weird ideas about what was going on, everybody would say, it's just John Lear. Don't listen to John Lear. The guy's crazy. You don't listen to John Lear. And that's what happened, because the day after he first went on the base in December of 1988, he went to John Lear's house, and he said, I was on the base, and it's real. And then John said, so is it theirs or ours? And he said, it's theirs. And he said, well, what are you doing here? You know they're going to be following you. Get out of my house. Go back and work for 6 months and then come back and talk to me. So John is telling the story. John Lear is telling the story. We've got the crafts at Area 51. Nobody's listening to him, not even at KLS TV. Only person that listened to him was Knapp, but Knapp really didn't do anything with it. And it was this bizarre incident that occurred in May of 1989, 6 months later, after John had been telling everybody knows listening to him, when they basically said, Knapp says to John Lear, he said, I'm missing a guest on tonight's show. Get some, you get that guy who was Area 51 that got fired? And he said, yeah. He said, bring him on my show. And that's when it went viral, because now it's Emmy award-winning reporter Knapp. But the way that it happened when you talked about, he takes Lear out to show him the craft. They're testing it the same night, or he's told. So if he's a part-time guy, he was only there a couple of days. He didn't make much money. He confirms he was only there a couple of times. So why would they tell him when they're going to test the craft? He's not involved in the testing. They told him because they knew he was going to take Lear out there.
But
so
there's a craft out there. I mean,
there's a light, not a craft, and it's filmed.
Come on with the light thing. I mean, these guys are not. He's not an idiot. He knows what he's observing.
Okay, so this is top secret technology. Say it's a craft. Say they're flying the craft, and then they get caught. The next day, they take it to Indian Springs and they put a gun to his head and they say, when we told you it was top secret, that didn't mean to bring your friends out here. And what do? Do they arrest him for releasing top secret material? No. All they do is suspend his security clearance. They say, oh, your wife is screwing around with the pilot that she's taking lessons from, and we're just going to suspend your security clearance. And they let him go, and they actually invite him back on the base again. It was Bob Lazar who didn't go back on the base. They never fired the guy. So if he was releasing all this top secret material, why didn't they fire him? They didn't fire him because they wanted to feed him more stuff. He was being fed this stuff. They wanted people to believe. Like people said, oh, we saw this craft levitated outside the hangar.
I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm willing to accept that part of the story, just like I'm willing to accept El Zanado did the same thing. I mean, right? He reveals all this stuff. And the next day he has a job with to the Stars Academy. He's a whistleblower that never. So it's the same script played over and over again. But our launching off point for this is something different. Our launching off point was you were saying, hey, there's no triangles. The ship changed shapes and all the rest of that. And are you countering Lazar's basic testimony that he was out there, he saw craft, he saw technology, and it flew in this way that was unexplainable in conventional terms? I mean, that's the point that I think is relevant to your statement about we don't have any of that technology.
That is something that I leave open. It's same as the Ben Rich statement. But what Lazar saw was a hovering craft. He didn't see the thing fly. When he was outside the hangar, it was just hovering in front of him. That's all he saw. He saw the crafts that were all in the bays, the 9 bays. But the whole thing was that Eric Davis, who's got the security clearances, who works for Hal Puthoff, who basically said that Roswell was real and that the Del Rio crash was real, and Hal Puthoff said there was a crash saucer document. These guys are on sort of on the inside. They've got these security clearances. It was he that said that they shut down the crash saucer program in 1989. That's the same year as Lazar. So the fact is they may have had 9 crafts, but they couldn't get anywhere. They couldn't reproduce it. It's like giving a cell phone to Da Vinci, something like that, where they've got it, but they can't figure the whole thing out. Whereas some of the stories are, we've had the technology since 1954. We've been flying around and stuff like that. That kind of stuff I don't believe. We understand some of the material. Absolutely. We understand some of the ideas, and we know that DNA is being affected. This sort of stuff, we know a lot of little bits and pieces, but do we have crafts where we're actually flying this stuff around? The more I look at it, the more I have my doubts that is going on. Doesn't mean that there's not triangles. Doesn't mean that the beings aren't flying triangles, but these triangles, even I know, the triangle that I saw didn't start off as a triangle. It started off as a huge arc welding light on the American border, which made a turn. And as it came down the road towards me, suddenly it turned into this triangle. 3 huge lights, 2 red lights and a green light in the back, and sat right above the car. And then this bizarre sort of breaking of the film thing, and it sort of moved off. So I'm not denying there's crafts. The question is, the more I look at it, the more suspicious all the various types of crafts, or the different types of beings. There's lots and lots and lots of different types of beings, and nobody sees one particular type of being. So when you're on the craft, you have Travis Walton, and you see the gray type beings, and then suddenly there's a humanoid, and then suddenly the people will report. Then there's a reptilian, and then there's this, and it's like all these beings are working together. That nobody sees one particular being. It's almost like they see. In the early part of their life, in the end of the part of their life, they start to see sort of more angelic type things, and they get the sort of the hybrid stuff goes away, and they start getting messages and all this love and light type stuff. The experiences aren't as clear cut as people think they are, and you see these bizarre incidents like Bud Hopkins, the key guy that started the whole abduction thing. And I pointed out in the lecture, how did it start? It starts with him going to the corner store to buy his liquor, and the guy tells him this story about this UFO that's 100 feet off the road, or 100 yards off the road, and there's these aliens with shovels outside the ship, and they're digging holes. And I'm going like, what the heck is that all about? And so he goes and he finds these 15 holes, 5 inches deep, and he's down the rabbit hole. He suddenly he can't let go of it, and he starts running after the thing. So is there actually aliens that really need to dig holes with shovels? They're doing so many bizarre things that to me, it's almost like it becomes less fluid, almost like the idea of consciousness, where you're really not seeing what you think you're seeing. It's like green. There is no real green. It's everything is space when you think it's solid, and there's no out there. It's all inside your head. This kind of thing, where the more you look at the world, the more you look at quantum physics, the sort of the more pliable it gets. And the same thing with consciousness, whether it's out of body experiences or near death experiences, lucid dreaming. The more you get into that thing, the more pliable the world becomes. The more you can sort of change and almost become like be in their world, where it's not solid anymore. It's not. Characters can change. You can move at the speed of light. You can move around in your astral body or whatever. And that's what my impression. And when I looked at all this stuff, is that we're in this physical world. We think everything's solid. There's separate particles. There's separate you, me, all this kind of stuff. And that's the way it is. And the more you disassociate and go into whatever that information field is, the higher you get up, the less physical, the less solid it becomes, and the more pliable it becomes, and the more it becomes the John Wheeler thing. You're manifesting what you're seeing. You are affecting what you are seeing.
So kind of getting back to the black budget stuff, like what about Stephen Greer's work, which is very similar to what you're saying in a way, that most, or if not all, of the ETs are not, malevolent. They're good for the most part, and that use consciousness to contact them. But he also takes it a little further and talks about the soft matter and the synthetic biology that is being created, maybe in some of these my labs, or, I mean, do you have any, what do you think about that whole thing? It's kind of,
as to Stephen Greer, the exception I've got, it's the same thing as this duality thing. So he just changes the duality. He says the aliens are all good. And I'm saying, no, the aliens aren't good or bad. Aliens are just souls that are reincarnating. And you may be an alien next time. So if you have evil aliens, and then suddenly you get born as one, are you now an evil alien? I mean, are you now evil because you are now reincarnated as a gray or a reptilian or whatever? So he wants to separate that. And then he has the problem, and everybody has this problem and I call it the Messiah complex. So the government comes to you and they say, I've got this top secret material, and I've, made an oath to the government to obey the law and uphold the Constitution, but I'm going to make an exception for you. I'm here to tell you the most top secret material we got in the country. It ain't happening. And I think Alex agrees that there's no whistleblowers. This is all set up. This is all manipulation. So what might happen with Stephen Greer is he gets a couple of people who give him some material that is legitimate. It's going towards the right thing. The easiest way to disrupt somebody in the field is not to go and kill him. It's to give him 100 bad witnesses. So he's got, 1,000 witnesses. And all they do is put in 100 bad witnesses to put a bunch of garbage in there, and you can't really believe anything. So Stephen is based upon his worldview, is basing it on what these witnesses. So the witnesses that don't agree, then he rejects them. But his stuff, like he's the ones that said that we have had anti-gravitic technology since 1954, and that we're withholding all this technology and stuff. And again, I may have believed that at one point. The more I look at it, the more I see guys like Firmage and Bigelow and guys with a lot of money and a lot of influence and a lot of contacts inside the government who don't appear to be anywhere. They're absolutely starting from the word go. And then when I heard Eric Davis said that we basically have gone nowhere. And again, you're at the Armed Services Committee, and they're trying to get this money to run a program, and they're basically saying, we don't have anything. We've ignored the subject. We haven't done anything with it. And the big bad Russians and the Chinese, they're way ahead of us. And we've got this threat, and we've got to deal with this threat, and we need some money. And I leave it open that there may have technology, but I just can't see that these high level guys, who I've followed a number of these guys for many, many years, would be so far off the mark if they could just buy this technology, just find it. Why play around in this other field when you could find some way to get some of the black technology and actually move ahead?
So
they're nowhere.
So why leak disinfo like soft matter or synthetic biology to somebody when some of the labs are working on that stuff, with funding from the Department of Energy? So I don't understand the intention, the purpose of that kind of meeting with somebody that's in the know to feed that. I mean, is it just to show that there's some advancement going on? Or, I mean, I just don't get that.
Well, total chaos. They want total chaos. They want the information. So what they'll do, and I'll give you the example of these latest documents that are leaked. I don't know if you're familiar with them. So Lou Elizondo, there's a big thing about where's Lou Elizondo's resignation letter? And there's this thing, well, we need his resignation letter. It's not classified and stuff. And To the Stars is under this attack, this resignation letter. So suddenly there's this story put out. Chris Mellon, who's one of the To the Stars Academy board members, the story is, well, he puts all these documents that they're going to use for the Senate the Armed Services Committee to get the money. He puts these documents on his website, and then someone hacks the website. That's one version. And the other one was he accidentally sent them out. He left them on his website, and people grabbed them off his website. And I'm going, no, this is like it's the same old scam thing. And so when I see it, I've been in this since the 80s when I was looking at these documents and stuff. So I said to them, okay, let me see the documents. Let me see Lou Elizondo's resignation letter. So they send it to me, and you got messiahs. You got these guys who believe they've been given classified material by the U.S. government, and we're on the inside of the government here, and we know what's going on, whatever. And they give me the document, and of course, number one thing I noticed right away is that there's no date on the document. It's a resignation letter to the Secretary of Defense, and they don't put a date on it. And I go, there's no date on this thing. This thing's been altered. It may be true material. So they put true material. They want you to know Lou Elizondo's story. And then they spell deferred retirement incorrectly, and they have a bunch of other spelling mistakes. And I'm going, this is the same game. You're altering documents. Or in the second document, they have these interviews they do with the Nimitz guys. There's 4 different ones. One, they've got the age, and the other 3, they go, he's about 40 years old. I'm going, really? I mean, you do this interview with the guy, and you just sort of say, oh, he's about 40 years old. I think Fravor was one of them, where they say, oh, he's about 40 years old or whatever, and this kind of stuff. So what you do is you take the material, you take the information, you surround it with disinformation, and then you go to somebody and you say, I'm here from the government, and I'm here to help you. And all you're doing is you're getting the story out that something's going on, but you throw mud in the water so nobody knows really what's going on. So you're doing both things at the same time. You're doing this gradual disclosure, but you're controlling it. And the way you control it is by creating this sort of disinformation, the sort of the Bob Lazar thing, where he's got 2 degrees that he claims he's got. Then suddenly you realize, oh, he doesn't have these 2 master's degrees that he claimed. Oh, he's a hoax, and everybody runs off, and everybody suddenly realizes that there's crafts at Area 51 because they didn't realize that an Emmy Award winning guy was going to put this story out there, and this thing gets viral, and then they get it back under control again. But that's what they're doing. They're just putting the story out in a controlled manner.
So I want to ask your take on this then. So, there was a lot of, Stephen Bassett, advocate for disclosure, has quite a following, quite a voice in the communities. He's done a lot of good work getting people together in Washington to talk about this stuff. So he's super upset that Hillary and Podesta can't be the disclosure people. I mean, he was really counting on that. I mean, he is fed up. But then after Trump gets in, they come up with this Lou Elizondo story and say the government has been looking at it. They've been funding this stuff. Now we're finding out the funding is also going through the ranch and all that with that movie coming out, but that's kind of a different topic. So, and then Trump comes out with the Space Force. I mean, is there, to me, where's this drip disclosure going then? And is there something going on between, let's say the 2 factions of the deep state, is Trump getting ahead of disclosure, getting ahead of this message by coming out with this after, obviously, the camp, you could say the camp of the Lou Elizondo is the same as the camp that's pushing for Hillary and Podesta to disclose something. Yeah,
well, okay, there's 2 separate issues. So the thing about the Space Force, George Knapp just did an interview on with Linda Howe and John Burroughs, and I listened to it about 5 times. And in there, he's asked that question, and he said, and he's on the inside. He knew about To the Stars when it, not To the Stars, with the ATIP program. He knew about it in 2007. He was told about the whole thing. He had the inside. He was told he couldn't talk about it, this sort of stuff. So George Knapp has a lot of material that he's got an insight on. He said he is firmly convinced that the The secret space program has nothing to do with the UFO thing. The key to the whole...
You mean Space Force?
Space Force, yeah. It has nothing to do with this UFO thing. It's a separate issue. I guess it would be with satellites, and we're going to shoot down each other's satellites and all this kind of stuff. I would see him as an expert. I don't have any information myself, but I would use his statement as my position for now. As to what was the other question? The whole thing about the what's actually going on. So the big thing I always say with To the Stars is the key thing is, how do you get the videos out? And everybody said, well, they weren't classified. They declassified them, whatever. But they've had videos. They've had gun camera footage since 1947. Kenneth Arnold was given 2 photographs. His daughter has come public that she was given 2 photographs by he was given 2 photographs by the 4th Air Force. And these were like gun camera pictures. And they tried to convince him that these were real. So they've been doing this all along. And so they've had all these gun cameras. So then suddenly they released the 3. And my immediate thing was, when you retire or resign in disgust from the Department of Defense, they don't give you the UFO videos to go as a goodbye present. Somehow they got these videos. It's the same story. Somebody's behind. So they said, okay, who's releasing them? They said, no, it's not To the Stars. To the Stars is not releasing them. Then Lou Alessandro's confronted. He said, no, I'm not releasing the videos. Then they said, well, who's releasing the videos? And then Lou Alessandro said, the government is releasing the videos, and we wait until they give us another video. So then they asked him, well, who's the government? And then, of course, he said, well, you'd have to ask the government that. That's the whole key, is there's some force inside the government, whatever it is, whether it's the president, whether it's some...
No, but hold it. I mean, here's Graham's point,
Maybe
and you can take one side or another. It clearly seems to be 2 sides. There seems to be 2 competing forces. And this is like no big secret. It's not meant to be super controversial, but there's a neo-left liberal globalist agenda kind of group, that's Podesta and Pizzagate and all those people. And then there's the nationalist who, with Darren's buddy over there in Russia and our guy in Washington, D.C., who say nationalist, we don't need millions of immigrants. Let's try and do it on our own. Russia first, America first, and all the rest of that. And I'm not making a value judgment. I'm not putting my poster in the front of my yard and picking one or another. I'm just saying that is how the world is divided now. It's not divided between Republicans and Democrats or liberals and conservatives. It's globalists and nationalists. And this is clearly a political play by the globalists. And they put it in the globalist press, the New York Times and the Washington Post. So, I mean, can't we deal with it from that reality? That's the reality.
No, that's not my impression. My impression is that there is no unified government. There's all sorts of competing people inside the government with different agendas. And they've been doing this since 1947. They've been doing this leaking stuff. They went to Disney. They went to my friend Bob Emmenegger in the 1970s. They went to my friend Bill Moore in the 80s. They've been doing this over and over and over and over again. There's some sort of plan, some sort of agency. And then you get the thing where they shut down the ASAP program. And then it was clear, and George Knapp said the names of the people will be released at some point. That Alessandro's boss was a super religious guy and believed that there was this force inside the government who shut the program down, that believed that this was allowing the Satan to come into the world, and they shut the program down. They pulled the money in 2012, and he said all the names are there, and eventually these names will be released. So you have these different ideas of how the world works. So you have this very religious group inside intelligence or the government or whatever that basically said, we are not doing UFOs. This is demonic. And they shut the program down. And so that's the thing. I'd say there's hundreds of different agencies, and they talk about it. So it's, you steal my money, I steal your money. Everybody's trying to get money. Everybody's trying to push their version, and it all comes down to money. In the United States, it's number 1 is money, number 2 is money, number 3 is money. So everybody's trying to get their budget. They're trying to push their budget. They're trying to say, we have the number 1 need in the Defense Department. You have $713 billion or whatever, and everybody's trying to get a piece of the pie. And my version of how the world works is the way it works. And it's all these competing interests. It's not.
Yeah, but there's something going on behind the scenes. It's not that simple, because there's not a lot of money going into this field at all. It's all black, right? There's how many trillions are missing? and how much is being funded through these other
Don't
channels,
start talking about that.
through
We're gonna
the
have some
CIA
planes flying
drug
into
stuff.
this
I mean, there's all
motherfucker.
kinds of stuff going on that's funneling and laundering money that's not part of a little bit of a $500,000 budget in a little tiny program. So it's past the political spectrum. And why now, if they've been leaking and slow dripping the stuff since 1947, like I agree with you, why now after Trump's elected, why now are they finally officially coming out with some sort of thing? I mean, we were closer than ever now.
It was supposed to happen before. It was supposed to happen with Podesta and with Hillary. That's why Podesta said to Lena Dunham, and he's running $1 billion campaign, and he says to Lena Dunham in September of 2015, Lena, good interview. Next time, ask her about the aliens. They had this plan. She went on the Kimmel show in November of 2015, and she wanted the UFO question. He was supposed to ask her the UFO question, and he didn't ask it. And when you had the WikiLeaks leak with the memo comes out, and it talks about the fact that she was really upset. He didn't ask her about UFOs. She had practiced for 5 minutes. They had this plan before. It was going to be Hillary.
But Grant, that's what he's saying. So jump ahead and saying, so they had it before, they didn't get elected, they licked their wounds for a while, and then they pushed it out anyway. I mean, that's obviously what happened. Some force,
but this is the same force that's been doing this all along. And that's why I said it's the high hurdle. Who's releasing the videos? There's somebody inside government who has the authorization to release these videos, because it's the old deal. This is the most highly classified secret in the United States, according to the Canadian government top secret document of 1950. You don't just release this stuff. Somebody is green lighting this stuff to come out. They're leaking it, and they don't leak the whole video. They leak parts of the video. They alter the documents. They change the spelling. They do all this kind of stuff. There's some program behind that is doing this leak. They're just doing it different from Bill Moore's time or from the 1990s when they released 3,700 pages of documents called the new MJ12 documents, 3,700 pages of documents. Now they've just learned how to do it a little bit better. They did it on steroids. I was told by Chris Bledsoe, who's was inside the To the Stars for a period of time, that it was Jim Semivan who set up the thing where the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Politico all go on the same day. This is a story that took 2 months to do. This was not a cut and paste story. They all did separate stories. The New York Times had a Pulitzer Prize. The Washington Post had a guy with 2 Pulitzer Prizes that ran the story. They all went the same day. So it's quite clear that they had planned this to come out. They waited for 9 months after Hillary had because they had to rework the plan because now all the characters had changed. But they just came back. But the same players are in behind, releasing it for whatever reason they're doing. And I think.
What do you think the reason is?
Yeah, I kind of want you to speculate on that. What?
I think it was the one explanation is the Brookings Report from 1960. The idea that unless you acclimatize the people, the lower civilization will completely be wiped off the map. That you have to acclimatize to the people to the fact that this is for real. You can't have them back in 1947, and then suddenly realizes that.
No, but that doesn't answer the why now. That doesn't answer the political nature of it.
They've never stopped. They're just doing it. They're just doing it with steroids. They've done it.
Why now? Why you just went through a very compelling. Because what?
The Borg is coming.
Well, no, but that's interesting. Yeah,
it's time to know.
It's time for Bluebeam, right? To me, it could be their last
maybe
card.
Something has to be accelerated.
Their last
or
card,
AI, or who knows, man? There's so many fucking wild cards right now.
Yeah,
they're talking about another disclosure in January or February. This is not over. This is this gradual thing. And that's what Lou Elizondo says. When we get the next video, we will release the video. And then they leak this stuff and they have these DVDs, the photos of these DVDs with all the videos on them. And they leak that. And they leak the transcript of the actual Nimitz thing with all the details, with actual names and phone numbers and stuff like that. They leak this. It hasn't stopped.
So then eventually they can say, once we're acclimatized, which isn't going to take too long, they can say what Darren said, the Borg is coming, Project Bluebeam comes into place, and that's their last card, their trump card to say, now the world becomes one because we're against the evil ETs, and there's your globalism.
Oh, well, to me, it depends who you're looking at. If you're looking at the Defense Department, we need a $2 trillion budget. And if we can get evil aliens, then we got a $2 trillion budget. And we're really going to be able to spend some money and make some big bucks on this thing. And if it's the guys like Putoff, who's spent his entire life, he and Kit Green, who are two of the key people, are two of the guys who have the longest, maybe the longest held top secret SCI clearances in the country. Yeah. They were working on the remote viewing program. They've been into this bizarre spooks and aliens and ghosts and all this crap. They've been in it their whole life, and they're trying to figure it out. And they're trying to get money for themselves. So they're going along with the threat thing. And according to some of the stories, they've got half a billion dollars. They've been given $500 million, and that's what they want. So everybody's trying to get their thing. So if you're Hal Putoff or you're Eric Davis and you're an astrophysicist, you have to make a proposal because you need to have a job. So you make a proposal. I'm going to do faster than light travel, and I need a program. And you go and you try to convince the government to give you money so you can do your little pet project. And the NASA people are doing their thing. We want to go to Mars, and everybody's pushing their little thing to get their money out of the defense budget. And it's all separated. And they've just, the people that are running it have just learned how to do it very, very well. And I think what they've done is, and I first pointed this out, now everybody sort of agrees with me, is that they didn't come to the UFO community. They didn't try to convince me and all the other UFO people, because we're very skeptical. There's a million questions. Nobody believes anything. Exactly. They went to the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Politico because they wanted to go to the public. And they're trying to shift the swing voters. So if you're in a vote, you're not going to go for the Republicans or Democrats. You're going to go for the swing voters. And that's what they're doing. It's like the old story. Science advances one funeral at a time. They're trying to swing the voter. They're trying to swing the attitude of the public to so that only 40% of people disbelieve instead of 50%. You're just moving the thing, and the more they drop it, the more people come online and they suddenly believe. And then you get to a point where it's like, when did gay rights get the rights? When did African Americans get the rights? And you go, well, I don't really know when it happened. It was like 20 years ago or so. And it's just going to happen. It's gradually happening. Even now, people will come and they'll say, oh yeah, I know UFOs are real. Once it went in the New York Times, it's New York Times, it's for real. They've shifted a lot of people's minds by having this thing appear in the New York Times. They never ran a full,
because that means there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
Yeah. And if that makes you money, then that's what you do. So, it's the whole thing. You get separation. We have an enemy. We have a need. I'm the guy that's going to solve your problem. You give me the money, and I'm going to build weapons, and we're going to beat the Russians at this, and Chinese, and we're going to get the evil aliens. And everybody's out to get money. It's the bottom line. Yeah, everybody's out to get money.
Not only that, there's a lot of money in us not getting along with any sort of agenda that makes us think the universe or the earth in general is more malleable than we think it is.
Well, that's kind of why I'm saying there's not a good reason for them to come out and do this, because that's where the end result's going to be.
Point at me.
That's where the end result's going to be, is we're going to become one, and we're going to once we realize this reality, we are going to become one. But that doesn't help you take over the world. I mean, that
exactly. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. You don't get a defense budget. You can't get any money by saying we're all one.
No, but I realize,
that's where the missing $2 trillion goes, is making sure that you don't point at me again. Is making sure that we don't think we're one.
But that's the missing piece. I agree with everything Grant's saying, but it's that it's the dark money, the missing trillions or billions or whatever it is that is really what we should be talking about, as far as what technology that's creating, like what alternate reality that's creating.
It's fucking Facebook and Twitter
technology. The most classified secrets are weapon technology, and the most money is going into weapons. It won't be going into anything else. It's like,
I think that's past weapons, though, isn't it? I mean, that's all fine with the actual military budget, but I don't think that stuff is going into weapons. I think that's going into mechanisms of control.
Pockets is where it's going. It's lining pockets all the way down.
Yeah, true enough. Yeah.
Even the whole thing about the Canadian government document. Why did the Canadians know in 1950 that mental phenomena. They were told by the Americans, mental phenomena.
Yeah, but you know what I think?
Involved. So how did they know that? Because there was nobody talking to aliens. Adamski would not come out until 9 days after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb. There was nobody talking to aliens. So how did they know? And the reason that now we know that there may have been a live alien at Roswell, and the alien was talking in people's heads. So if you're the CIA and the military, you say, my God, can you imagine if we had this technology? That's why they went to the MK Ultra. It wasn't because they wanted to drug people. They were trying to figure out how consciousness works. And we don't care how we do it, how many people we hurt. We're going to figure out how consciousness works because we are going to get it before the Russians get it. Because if the Russians and North Koreans and all these people get it, we're in trouble. But it's still weapons. It's the ability to get into people's minds, to manipulate and that kind of thing. To me, it always comes down to this separation thing. It's me versus you. And the guys who can create the most separation, the most need for me to save you is the guy that's going to get the most money.
Yeah. Don't forget that, Hitler was talking to the aliens and how we brought over half the Nazis in Project Paperclip. So, that, and then there was people talking to them way before the 40s. Not that has anything to do with that, but you know what I mean? I mean, that, you know.
And that's why they brought the paperclip people, not because they were pro-German, but because these guys could advance their weapons. It always comes down to the same thing. It's the ends justifies the means. And if you're a weapon guy, even Elizondo said this whole deal about, they're in our airspace. And we have to do something. And Eric Davis said the same thing. We have to do something. This is our job. This is the Nuremberg defense. This is our job. We have to, if somebody comes in our airspace, we got to kill them. And I always sort of, make the joke, well, it was your airspace off the coast of California. But before 1848, it was Mexican. You stole it from the Mexicans, and the Mexicans stole it from the Aboriginals. And before that, nobody owned it. And if you come right down to it, the aliens have been here for thousands of years, according to everybody. It's actually the alien planet, and it's probably a good idea that we leave the planet. It's actually their planet. They were here first. If we want to play the game of whose airspace it is.
Alex, do you want to?
Not if we evolved here. Fuck that. I'll fight.
Do you want to address before we run out of time? Like, do you have any where you want to go?
Here's what I keep picking at. I keep saying I'm a yogi. I'm a yogi. That's my perspective, and I'm deeply into reading and studying all that stuff. There's something about this story that doesn't ring true with the best accounts you hear of the spiritual masters that we have. So I was telling Grant, I'm the hugging saint, who works tirelessly to help people. She ain't saying shit like this. Neem Karoli Baba. Neem Karoli Baba walking around with the cup on his head, broken cup. He's gone now. But I mean, there's a quality of difference that they don't do Whitley Strieber. They don't do Skinner Cage. They don't, take kids and lock them into cages and subject them to this horrible trauma in order to wake them up. Now, I can't quite square that. I don't know. I mean, so that's what I keep scratching at is, are they counterfeiting the spiritual experience in a way, because we are very susceptible. I go back to go watch Darren Brown hypnotize people and mind control people. We are so freaking feeble-minded, all of us, that we just don't know the extent to which they could be manipulating our association with what is spiritual in order for their own gain. I'm not sure that's the way it is. I'm just not sure I'm willing to dismiss that possibility. Everybody's
manipulating. I'll tell you a story. Maybe you can finish with this. If you followed the John Burroughs, you know that they're doing this thing with experiencers, the To the Stars. It's not really To the Stars. It's helped put off Gary Nolan, who apparently has now quit, and Kit Green, who used to run the Weird Desk at the CIA. And John Burroughs tells the story that he was one of the people in the program. So you have these military people who have interacted and have been injured, and they wanted John Burroughs' DNA. And Kit Green from the former CIA guy, got him his disability. And so he agreed, okay, I'll give you my DNA. And then he said, well, will I learn what's actually going on with my DNA when you finish the test? And Kit Green said, okay, we'll give you the report. And this happened, it's not that long ago. So Kit Green phones him up and he says, are you sitting down? And John says, just tell me what's in the test. I don't have to sit down. He said, no, seriously, I need you to sit down. So John sits down and he says, I just want to let you know that your son and you have totally unique DNA. And then John starts to go off and he doesn't really want to talk about it, whatever. But what he says is, then Kit Green tells him, he says, I need you to do something. I want you to do an experiment. And the way he described it, I believed Kit Green had told him he should start meditating. I talked to a researcher who told me that John had told him it was yoga. And so you have this guy inside this program dealing with military people who've been injured, former guy who ran the CIA and was actually the control officer for the remote viewing program in the 1970s, who's actually telling John to do either meditation or yoga. And then John says, he calls it the big C. He says, and it started to open up and his contact started to increase. And he said, the stuff actually works. And that's where this whole thing. So you say they're these bad guys, and yet you have the guy on the inside who's actually sending them back to this ancient program, whatever it is, to open his mind, which means that not only do they know the bad parts, but they know this other aspect of the consciousness.
That's fascinating.
That's
fascinating.
That's a great story.
Yeah, that was pretty recent.
Yeah, this is only a couple of months, and John still is using the word the big C. He doesn't really want to. He said, "I really don't want to talk about." And I've got an audio tape that anybody, if you want to get it, I'll send you an audio tape where you hear it's Kit Green, who is he's the neurologist. So he's the Disney neurology, and then it's Gary Nolan, who is doing the DNA stuff, and Hal Puthoff, who's the science guy who sets up the experiment. And I was sent this tape, which was a program, and it had Kit Green talking to an intuitive. So here you are. They're using an intuitive. You would never would have believed. This is like this program that's running with these experiencers, military experiencers. They're using an intuitive. And Kit Green on this tape is saying, this woman is 95% accurate. So they give them targets like 1, 2, 3, 4, and they've got these injured people. And that's my impression. And they give them 001, 002. And then he says, okay, this person, tell me about them. And and she names it off, and he says, stop. And he, according to him, she's 95% accurate. And then he says, okay, who are they dealing with? And then the woman says, oh, there's these aliens, and there's a base. It's a portal under the coast of California. And she starts this totally bizarre stuff that you never would believe. And so I told Burroughs about it. He said, I don't believe there's such a tape. I said, John, there's a tape. It's like 45 minutes long, and it's like absolute la-la land stuff. I mean, you can't believe they're doing this kind of stuff. And so I sent him the tape, and he contacts me back right away. He said, that is Kit Green's voice. And so he contacts Kit Green, and all Kit Green would say is, this is a messy situation. The client leaked the tape. Legally, I can't talk about it. End of story. And so you have this tape, and you hear what they're doing, and you realize they have the sort of the evil aspect of what they might be doing. But then you have this other aspect, which is like total new age world. I mean, I couldn't believe I was listening to Kit Green talk about this kind of stuff, and they're using these intuitives and talking about portals and just really, really new age stuff. There's no other way to describe what's going on. And it seemed like that's kind of the stuff that they may be doing behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I mean, especially because, you hear about the California island, like off of Catalina Island. I mean, we've had a couple episodes like the guy with the orange orbs. I mean, he's pointing to that spot as Terry Ray as that's where the data shows these things are coming from. And then you got this. So yeah, send over the tape for sure, Graham. I'd love to hear that. That'd be.
So they're coming out of the ocean.
Well, no, it's a portal underneath the coast. So yeah, ocean maybe through this. Maybe it doesn't
Pacific
matter
Rim?
if it's underwater or not.
And anybody else.
I live close. We live. Both my sons on separate times have been surfing down here, North San Diego County, and seen a UFO.
Wow!
Confirmed with with other guys they were surfing with that they didn't even know, but UFO come out of the water.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a USO then.
30, 40, 50 miles from Catalina Island.
Wow.
Any aliens?
Yeah.
You can play the tape for your son, and then you'll hear this guy. And anybody else, you'd say, it's just a crazy guy. But Kit Green is Wayne State University.
He's like a scientific molder.
Yeah, he's like, I mean, he's worked on all these different programs. He did the one program, and when the one guy exposed this, and I don't know if you've ever had Gary Beckham on, but he's no longer wants to talk. He had a sort of intelligence background. He came across this thing where Kit Green is on this thing about non-local consciousness, and he was trying to verify this. And he was working with this guy in the National Academy of Sciences in China, and they were doing this experiment in 2008. They had proposed to do this experiment where Kit Green's this MRI guy. They put two people in an MRI machine, one in China and one in the United States, and then they would do a telepathic signal, and they would look at the MRI to see whether the signal was instantaneously received on the other end, to see is consciousness non-local or is it not. And on this tape, you can actually hear him talking about this experiment, but now it's changed. They're going to have this intuitive in the one MRI machine, and they're going to have Uri Geller in the other MRI machine, and they're going to send this signal. And he said, Yuri's going to want his crew, because he always wants the TV people around, but this is not going to happen. But you hear this guy, this leading scientific guy, and he's running around and he's telling people about this program. They're sort of, again, leaking these indirect stuff about this program, and it appears it's all got to do with this consciousness aspect and with this DNA thing. Where they talk about the antennas, where they say all the experiencers have this antenna, which fits into my theory, is the idea that you're in the dark ocean, and because you have the antenna, you're able to pick up a signal. You're able to get stuff from the higher realms or space or wherever it's coming from. You're able to bring it in, and that's why they watch the experiencers. That's why these former intelligence people are watching experiencers. It's the old deal that they're not talking to the government, and you can't discover anything by watching stuff fly around in the sky. You've got to follow the experiencers. Why are they in contact with the experiencers? How are the experiencers able to contact these beings? And again, it'll go back to military stuff. If we can learn to do this, then we can learn telepathy and we can get it in, because the only way you're going to get the research money is to build it into a military research budget, which says we've got to get this before the Russians, and this has got technological capabilities which can be used against us.
So whatever happened to last time you were on the show? It was quite intriguing because it was shortly after you had found the government guys. Now I can't remember who it was. They were talking about the portals, and they were on that public video forum talking about the portals. And I don't know if that was especially related to like Skinwalker Ranch or anything like that. But whatever, was there anything that happened with that has changed your point of view?
Well,
lately?
I'm still doing the book. I think you're talking about the Mission Rama thing, where I go and I get this message from this alien, that I'm going to Mount Shasta in California to meditate for world peace, because this girl that I helped me edit stuff and helped me out. And I figure, okay, all these Latino people go and sit on the side of a mountain and meditate for world peace, which I didn't want to do, but I went because my friend asked me to go. And then I get this message that we're going to have this program sighting, which is the idea that these groups, which are called Mission Rama groups, are able to somehow bring in beings. And the difference between the Skinwalker Ranch, where they're walking around with guns, these black ops people and stuff like that, where they're having all these horrendous experiences with these evil forces and cattle mutilations and stuff. And then you have the Mission Rama people who are doing basically the same thing. They're interacting with these beings, and they're coming out of portals and stuff like that. But there's no mutilations, there's no evil, there's no wolves. It's all these angelic beings, and that's this whole thing about this manifestation thing, where again it seems to confirm that you get what you put out. Or there's a guy in California that this guy with the 5-foot owl. One of the stories he told me from the being that he encountered was the fact that was two things he got from the being. One was he said to the being, "If you are a being or whatever, put something in my head I don't already know." And what was put in his head was this idea about biocentrics. And he thought, what the hell's that? And he went home and he looked it up, and it's a book written by Dr. Robert Lanza. There's actually two books.
Biocentrism.
And this is biocentrism. And you look at that. That is what I'm saying. It's like consciousness is an illusion. Time and space are illusions. Life creates the universe, not the other way around. It's not a random world. He goes through the whole thing. And this is the guy to first clone an extinct species. So my friend contacts him, and he wants to do a documentary in Hollywood. The guy says, I'll help you out, but I can't be involved. I'll give you my assistant, this sort of stuff. But one of the things he was told by the being was this whole idea about this manifestation thing, that if you are, and this John Mack came up with this idea at the end of his life, where he started to hypothesize that if you saw grays, you had a certain type of personality, that you were sort of, I can't remember what the thing was, but reptilians. And I know with the reptilians, I know one girl with the reptilians is you have like a very sort of energetic personality, and you're interested in sex and all this kind of stuff. And then you have the angelic types, the real spiritual people who are bringing in alien type people, and it's sort of the manifestation. And what he told me that the being had told him was when they encounter people, they have to scan your brain to see what's in there. And if you are embedded in fear, they will use fear to teach you a lesson, because that's all they can do. They can only use what's in your head. So they are using what's in your head to teach you lessons. And this would go to this whole idea that if you're in the love and light, you're going to manifest, your experiences are going to be that way. If you're a Christian, you're going to see Jesus. If you're, an atheist, you're going to see, something else. It's this whole idea that we have a lot more influence on what we're seeing than we don't. And this whole screen imaging thing seems to be this whole thing, that you think it's an alien and suddenly it turns into a ball of light, or it turns into a rabbit, or it turns into a doctor. And it's this very sort of pliable world that seems to be justified by this Mission Rama thing that never had a cattle nation, has never had an evil thing. It's all these messages about saving the world and love and light, and these beings, 10-foot beings with almost like the 1950 contactees, and it's all just wonderful stuff. And then on the Skinwalker Ranch, it's like this horrible place where all this stuff, and it follows people home and all this kind of stuff. And these black ops guys are stopped in their tracks and threatened and told to get off the ranch and this sort of stuff. It's two different worlds, and they're both doing basically the same thing.
Huh. I think the portal thing that I don't know, maybe it was Kit Green talking to, it was somebody and his wife, somebody in the CIA or ex-CIA and his wife talking about portals. Oh, that's
Pandolfi, yeah.
Oh, Pandolfi, yeah. Right, yeah.
Yeah, Pandolfi. That was the whole thing. That was the Joe Firmich thing. The Joe Firmich spent like $100 million, and I'm trying to verify, does Joe Firmich have a portal? And it was the old thing about the evil people. So they're saying, oh, Joe Firmich, you can't listen to that guy. He's got cocaine problems, and he's got impaired, and there's people chasing him for money. And I go, okay, yeah, whatever. But does he have a portal? And then go, well, he's really bad. I had a private investigator, and I go, I really don't care what he does in his private time. I want to know one question: does he have a portal? And nobody could answer this whole deal. And then what it appeared was that they're doing this anti-gravity thing. They've been through 9 different versions, and he's at Salt Lake. And the guy does have problems with money. He's borrowed all this money from people. People are chasing him for money and stuff. But he's on version 9, and they're trying to levitate this thing off the ground. And he does talk about have a portal application. But again, here's a guy who's worked on it since the 1990s. He had this, $2.5 billion .com company that he was running, and he has this vision in the middle of the night with this being that comes over his bed, and he tells the being, "I want to travel in space." And the being looks very annoyed, and he said, "Why should we help you?" And Firmich says, "Because I'm willing to die for it." And at that point, when I talked to his head engineer, according to that, Firmich was sort of taught. Given the ideas of how to work inside an atom, how to operate inside an atom. And so he's been obsessed since the 1990s. He gave up the .com thing, he gave up his company, and invested every dime he's got into this whole thing about portals and about, levitation, about, this kind of stuff, using these spinning gyro things. And so the question is, if he spent all this money and he has all these contacts and is this big time guy, why is he still working on this Mickey Mouse technology if we're flying stuff we're landing on Mars and we've got bases on Mars and the moon and we're traveling to different stars? Why is he working on this Mickey Mouse technology? Surely he would have something better than that. And that's where I start to doubt the secret space program, that maybe this stuff's all, crazy stuff that they're just throwing in, because that's the way they work it. If you get something, they have 2 options. They can come and kill you, which gets kind of messy, or all they do is just throw some dirt in your water and mess the whole thing up, so you don't know what to believe and what not to believe, you just put in a second story, which happened with Bob Lazar. If you remember the story with the Dulce base, the story that was being put out in the 1980s, the Dulce base, and the aliens shoot 64 people. They come in with guns and not supposed to have guns. There's this big shootout. 64 special forces are killed under the Dulce base. Well, Bob Lazar was told that story the second day he went onto the base. He's given 125 documents to read. When I train people, when you train them, the second day you don't tell them how the program works and all these different documents. You basically show them where the washroom is, you show them where the lunchroom is. That's about it. And he gets 125, and he is told exactly the same story. He's given a document, exactly the same story as the Dulce shootout, except this time it happened under Area 51. That's the whole thing I think they do, is they just mess the stories up. They make it all bounce around. And meanwhile, they're financing their programs, and they keep people away from what they're doing. But it's an American phenomenon. It's only the United States of America where they leak this kind of stuff. In Canada, people always ask me, what's going on in Canada? I say, I haven't got that foggiest notion what's going on in Canada, because the government doesn't talk about it. So if you wanted to cover it up.
The government doesn't have the foggiest notion what the fuck's going on.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the whole thing. If you wanted to cover the thing up, and this is my big thing. People say, oh, they're trying to cover this thing up. They're trying to, make it go away. If you wanted to make it go away, you would do what Canada, Sweden, Great Britain, France, every other country in the world has done. You just sit and shut up and quit talking about it, and the story will go away. It's only in the United States of America where this happens. It doesn't happen in any other country in the world where you have whistleblowers and people leaking documents and stories of crashes. I just interviewed a woman from Denmark this morning. I said, okay, somebody crashed flying saucers you guys. And she said, never heard a single story. Nothing in Denmark. Nothing. And that's the thing. It's an American phenomena. And
a lot of Hollywood, Hollywood in America.
But a lot of those cultures and countries already accept that there's extraterrestrials out there, that there's beings visiting us. I mean, South America is already like that. I mean, a lot of countries, even France has done their scientific investigations. It's not really like they're not bothered about it. They already kind of accept that it's here. So it's not. It's kind of. I understand what you're saying, but it's not quite as cut and dry.
Well, I'll give you an example of Germany. In Germany, you can't even talk about it. Nobody will even listen to you. It's absolutely a non-topic in Germany. Yeah. I mean, the guy that runs the German thing said it's absolutely unbelievable. He said no newspaper will cover a story. They could not care less about anything. They're into whatever, building their cars and whatever. It's the mindset where the mind thing. And it may be the whole thing, like the woman this morning said with Denmark, we didn't have any nuclear weapons, which may be why the United States is the focus of this whole thing, because it has a lot to do with nuclear weapons. It doesn't matter what period of time you go. You can bring all these stories about the contactees appearing, the green fireballs all had nuclear weapons. My story involved nuclear weapons. They're shutting nuclear weapons. They're making nuclear weapons launch down. All cattle mutilations happen downwind and downstream from nuclear power and contamination, stuff like that. It's a big topic. So that may be why the United States of America is such a focal point of this phenomena, is because it has the highest technology. It has the most weapons. It has the most nuclear stuff, and that may be why it's inundated. Whereas in some countries, it's like a non-topic. Nobody even you're nuts even to talk about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I also appreciate the context with Pandolfi and that portal thing, because I didn't make that connection before. I didn't realize the one you were talking about, as an example of not having anything past the technology that he's working on with his millions of dollars is the same guy that was talking about portals with
Here's
Pandolfi,
a question.
So.
How did Germany lose the war but still end up in control of Europe
and the United States and the United
States? They work harder. That's their focus, is just to build and invest.
Well, we can agree on this. If the cattle mutilating helicopter crashes in your yard, run like a motherfucker. Because nobody lives to talk about that.
Yeah.
Right on, guys. Well, it's been a fantastic chat. Grant, do you have anything else you want to mention, or Alex as well, before we kind of wrap it up?
No, this guy's the best, though. I'm always just awestruck by the amount of knowledge he has. It's like a month's worth of work just to follow up on everything.
Totally.
Well, I have one interesting story they're working on right now. I just was working on it tonight. I have a radio show in 2 weeks. I've got Damon Steer on. Damon Steer was the guy who asked Hillary the question the UFO question. She kept wanting the demand for the UFO question. He was the first guy to ask her because he's in New Hampshire. He's a reporter in New Hampshire. And there you have to go from town to town. You can't just sort of, fly in, fly out, that kind of thing. You got to actually, because it's the first primary that everybody tries to sort of win to get the momentum and stuff. And he's talking to two of the people that are running now for the, is it the House? I think it's the House. And I just found out tonight he's going to be on my show. We're going to do an election show, and he's got the grandson of what's the president? Cleveland, Grover Cleveland, the grandson. He's a UFO fanatic, and he's interacting with the people that are running in the House. And one of the people in the House, and he wants me to try to invite her on the show. There's no way she's going to come, but she's on the House Armed Services Committee, which is supposedly the committee where they're trying to get the money for the To the Stars people for all this research stuff. And so he's actually interacted with her because you can't really avoid these small town newspapers. And so I'll see what he's got to say, what conversations he had with her. And this guy, it's the same thing. He had his UFO sighting. Then he sort of asked this question of Hillary. And now this guy is like obsessed with this stuff. And because his paper sort of became famous for the story, his editor tolerates it. He allows him to sort of do it a little bit of it. And so I'm looking forward to this story, how this unravels. And then you have this other woman. I tried to get her on the show. She was running for the GOP in Florida. I don't know if you heard about her. Her name is Bettina Aguilera. And she's been taken 7 times. She talks about the beings. She knows exactly what the beings are. And she was running for Congress. And the Miami Herald actually backed her in the primary. And she ended up losing the primary. I wanted her to come on the show. She said she'd give me her first interview, but she's not willing to come on the show yet. But you get these type of people that are running for Congress, and her story is like just really, really, really major, total recollection, these beings, the planets they took her to and stuff like this. And then she drops the bomb. She says, and the second most powerful experience I had happened on exactly the same day as Travis Walton. And she's trying to track Travis Walton down to talk to him because she had this major event on the same day as he had. And his event happened at the same time they were doing the nuclear weapon thing on the Canadian-U.S. border. They were going Loring, Wordsmith, Minot, and Malmstrom. They were all these they called them mysterious helicopters, were inside the nuclear weapon storage areas. And with their lights flashing, and bright as can be so everybody can see them. This all happened at the same time. So you see these bizarre synchronicities, but there's a couple of more politicians out than before, and hopefully they can sort of enlighten people as to what's going on, because in terms of the government, you're never going to get it. They're manipulating it for their own benefit, for their money, to get their budget. And it's like second level of secrecy. So you have the government secrecy. Now you got To the Stars secrecy, and then they get upset because they keep all the secrecy, and then their budget thing, their bi-yearly financial report comes out, and it shows they're $37 million in the hole. They only collected $1 million. They've only got $100,000 in the bank, and all this kind of stuff. And now it's backfiring on them because everybody's trying to grab every little straw that they can to get a story. And their secrecy is backfiring, but they've got this whole level of secrecy that they've got all this stuff and they won't tell us. And it's like MJ-12 too. You have the government secrecy, now you got To the Stars secrecy. So
yeah, good point. So how can people listen to that then? That's coming up in a couple of weeks. The easiest way is probably to go on my Cameron Files is the KGRA Cameron Files. All the archives are there. Okay.
So you'll see that interview will be fairly interesting because Damon Steer has talked to these Congress people, and he said it's one of the sort of the swing seats, one of the key seats that everybody's trying to win is this New Hampshire seat. And so it'll be interesting to see what he's got to say, because he's been working on this since he asked Hillary the question. He's been obsessed with this political angle to this whole thing, and seems to know fairly well what's going on. He's the guy that gave me the first indication that there was something wrong, because as soon as it happened, as soon as they made the big disclosure last December, I said, Damon, you got to follow it. You got the one big story, file an FOA. It's first come, first serve. Get in line. We got to get the documents on the To the Stars and all the documents and the videos and where the videos came. And he actually talked to the Pentagon, to this Harris, who was in the Public Affairs Office. And Harris said to him, I can assure you that we did not release any videos. I can absolutely assure you we did not. And as soon as I heard that, I go, same game. They're doing the same game. It's like you drop it out there and nobody can verify it. Everybody's bumping into each other. Yeah. Everybody's accusing everybody else of hoaxing it and stuff like that. And it's the same game. It's almost like the same fingerprints on. In fact, a lot of them are. Kit Green, who's one of the key people in this To the Stars thing, was involved in 1980. I was chasing Dr. Eric Walker from Penn State University, and Bill Moore, who had the Avery at the time, one of his Avery was Kit Green, who was the Blue Jay. He actually sent Kit Green in 1988, I believe it was, to find out what did Dr. Eric Walker actually know. So these are the same players that were there. Hal Puthoff was there. John Alexander was there. It's the same players. It's just they've, as I look at it, they've learned better how to do it. They're doing it on steroids. They've manipulated the thing to get the story a bit more out than before, but it's the same story. It's the same scam, the same altered documents. You're never going to verify it. It bounces around. People are fighting with each other, and that's the same game as they've done for 70 years.
Well, it could be working. I mean, honestly, you say it on steroids, but we're seeing a difference in, like, I have my own little group that I go out with, and we're seeing over the last couple of years, there's more and more sightings now. Almost every time we go out, if it's a far enough away spot, we will see a bunch of flash bulbs and some low flyers. And this has been happening. Like, I used to go out in the 90s, never see anything. Now it's like it is a regular thing. It seems to be corresponding with this this drip that's on steroids, this drip of disclosure that's on steroids. So,
yeah, And remember, when you see the light,
500,000 fucking
you're part
satellite
of the game.
TV stations.
Yeah. Well, so do you have a new website beyond Presidential UFO?
Yeah, there was a thing where it was the old deal where you sort of get an expert build your website for free, and then he runs into financial problems and all this kind of stuff and can't do it anymore, and then you're stuck with a website you haven't got the foggiest notion what to do. So it's been rebuilt, but they couldn't. So it's beyond Presidential UFO. So I've got the archive would be all the presidential stuff, but most of the stuff that I'm going to be posting is going to be going down the consciousness road and that kind of stuff. I've got a little bit on Donald Trump, but basically I think it's like the sightings is a waste of time because it shows, there's something's going on. It's not ours. The medals will show, yes, this is extraterrestrial. We couldn't have built it on this world. That doesn't get you anywhere. And the president knows what's going on, but he's not going to tell you. So that's not going to get you anywhere. And it comes down to this whole deal that there's 4,000 experiencers who are willing to tell you exactly what's going on. They're willing to tell you. And you start seeing these crossovers with out-of-body experiences, with near-death experiences, with, shamanism, with all this stuff. And you start to see these parallels and you go like, oh my God, this is all this. It's basically all the same thing. It's just a different aspect, a different thing. The DMT, they've got the aliens in there and the abductions and stuff. And, Strassman's going, have you been abducted? Like, and you see these crossovers, and that's where it's almost like the sort of the light coming on where I'm realizing like, oh, this consciousness thing that I got is actually going to be turned out to be right. And then you've even got the movement that Jan Hartson, who had experience himself with a craft 30 feet away when he was 9 years old or whatever, the head of MUFON is actually doing a lecture. I'm doing a lecture on consciousness, a big lecture. He's actually doing a lecture in Laughlin, Nevada in November, beginning of November with me there. And he's doing consciousness and UFOs. I could not believe it. When here's the head of MUFON is suddenly, they're into the super nuts and bolts. Like it's got to be scientific, and scientific means we got to be able to measure it. Scientific is the physical world. Unless we can measure it, weigh it, feel it, touch it, unless it's physical, we ain't going to believe it. And so they're still into the nuts and bolts. We got to be scientific. All this other stuff is anecdotal and stuff like that. And to have a guy who's head of this sort of physical scientific group suddenly give a lecture on consciousness, I just sort of blown away. It's making its move. We're starting to make a little headway, I think.
Yeah, that's great. So people can go to Beyond Presidential UFO, and then they can find your Cameron files there, and then they can listen to your radio show, I guess, through that. And then that one you're coming up with is in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and my White House UFO YouTube channel. I post a lot. Most of my lectures are on there.
Okay.
And I post most of my new stuff on there because I got convinced. It's the old deal. Like I'm getting on in age, and you run into people and you sort of take their advice. It's like, nobody reads books anymore, and nobody has got time for a lecture. Everybody's into 15-minute YouTube videos. And I actually got convinced. I thought, and then I did the Tom DeLonge thing at the very beginning, and I got like 110,000 hits a couple times because I was doing the Tom DeLonge update because I had people inside Tom DeLonge's operation. I knew what was going on, and I went, holy shit, this is like talking to 5 stadiums. It's like, why didn't I realize this before? And you sort of realize, and so I've sort of moved away from the books and stuff. And, these younger people are sort of trying to educate me. But again, it's the thing where people are doing it for me. So if it breaks down, it sort of all falls flat on its face because I have no idea how to do the technology stuff. I just do the research stuff.
Yeah.
That's like Graham.
Yeah. Right on. Well, no, that's good. I mean, I've seen you on Instagram a little bit too, so you're getting on the social medias a little bit more. And then, Alex, how can people listen to your stuff?
Skeptico.
Skeptico.com. Yeah, right on.
Skeptico with a K, motherfucker.
I'll give a plug for Alex. I've listened to every episode, and I use a lot of them because I'll think, somebody had. I remember like the one with Julia Asante was on your show, and I keep going back to numerous times. I go back because she has this thing about it. It's all one life, and it's all like stacked cards and stuff like that. And I always go back to that one. And there's a number where I go, I remember Alex talking to this person, and I go back and go through the the thing, and I actually use a lot of Alex's material. He's done a lot of key interviews with a lot of key people that have been in the consciousness field, and very, very resourceful. The stuff that he's done is been very helpful to me over the years. And a lot of his episodes I've listened to 5 or 6 times, and that's the way you work it is. And you'll go back after not listening to it for a couple of years, listen to it again, and you'll hear something.
New stuff,
I didn't hear that the first time. It's like it's just bizarre that. So it's a real resource. I mean, it's. I guess he got somehow that's his role in life to come here and do that, and is doing a good job at it.
Yeah, you're both doing a fantastic job. Love having you guys on, and really love all your work, both you guys. And man, this is really like my dream episode, my favorite guys to chat with. So it's been awesome.
When we started the podcast and Graham had to choose his dream guest, it was Grant Cameron.
And at that point, I had already listened to all the Skeptico episodes at that point, and I still do. So, yeah, it's awesome.
Awesome.
Right on, guys.
Awesome. So great.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for letting me do this. It was so fun.
Oh, yeah, it was good.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Thank you guys both for coming on the show.
Yeah. And who's your next guest? You had Valet. I used that one as well, too. I went back, listened to Valet, your episode with Valet a number of times, because I thought Valet was nuts. I mean, I as I said, I got dragged into the consciousness thing. I didn't choose to come here. I used to think Valet was absolutely off his rocker. I just thought he was totally crazy. Yeah. And now it's like I've gone down that road, and it's so when I listen to him very closely, because he is one of the guys that has a lot of inside government sources, a lot of insights with military people, scientific people, and he's still talking the same game.
Yeah,
and he's no dummy, this guy. So it was excellent that you got him on your show.
Yeah, well, that was all thanks to Alex for helping us out with that one. And I don't know, we're going to try and have Dolan on again. We had him on a short one a few years back, but we want to have him on. And as far as the, UFO and consciousness goes, we're not too sure. We got a bunch of other types of shows coming up.
Well, what you want to do is get Dolan's wife on. Because Dolan is not the consciousness guy; he's the nuts and bolts, guy.
We'll
but his wife, I did the first interview. Was that?
Okay. We'll have them both on, see if we can get them fighting.
Yeah, well, she is something else. I don't know if you've ever heard her. I did the first interview she ever did, and her and I are talking about right brain, left brain, and it was unbelievable. And Richard's falling asleep, and he's looking at his watch. It's like midnight, and he's like giving her a hint, "Come on, let's get out of here." And she is really. She knows what's going on. She is really sharp, really sharp.
Karen
Dolan. No, that was his first way.
Oh, okay.
Tracy,
Okay.
Yeah. She's into the whole thing. And anything you bring up in terms of consciousness, remote viewing, all this stuff. She is really on top of the whole thing. Completely opposite of Richard Dolan. So they really balance each other out.
That's good. Right on. All right, guys. Thanks.
Right on, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for coming.
Okay.
Keep in touch.
Do this again soon.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great seeing you, Grant.
See you guys.
Take care, you guys. Thanks for being in touch.
Yep.
There you have it. That was our chat with one of my Grant Cameron, Graham's dream guest. Third time?
That was like 5.5 years ago.
Yeah. Look how much you've grown. Like 40 pounds. Big thanks to Alex T for sponsoring the show, coming on the show.
Yeah,
having a
that
great
was
chat.
great. Well, that was fantastic.
2.5
really
hours
good.
of gold.
Yep.
Support the show.
Learned a lot.
Grimerica.ca/support. That was a fun one.
What did you think about that?
You know me, I don't really get down with all the UFO
I know,
stuff.
but there's so much
fun.
other stuff overlapped and intertwined. I mean,
I tried to
the
poke in a couple
consciousness,
times, but then by the
the
time
simulation,
by
the
the time there was
government
a gap,
stuff, the
it
deep
was like-
state, like come on.
see,
the
it's like
black
this guy
budget.
just gets going.
Yeah, there was lots.
Yeah,
It's hard to dissect all that.
yeah,
Especially when he's so chatty.
yeah. That's awesome.
I was trying to sneak in my black budget helicopter joke and the cattle mutilation
thought
thing.
that was good. I thought
Yeah, I
that
know,
was
but
good.
I was trying to sneak that in for like an hour. All right, guys, really do support the show. Where else are you going to get 2.5 hours? We don't paywall it. We don't cut it off. We don't do fuck all. We just need you to support the show so that we can move out of Brody's spare bedroom. Grimerica.ca/support. Subscribe. Check out the new website, Grimworks. It's all awesome. It's all great. You guys are great. Support the show because we love you. That's it.
Yeah.
All
thanks a
right,
lot.
motherfuckers. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next week.
When he said yes to me, next thing that I knew, I was skipping to my loo. Someone call up an ambulance. I think that my heart stopped from dancing with you. Girl, you is my gumdrop. Fetch pale water from the top of Chapel Hill. You could even meet my pa. You could even meet my ma. Girl, 'cause you got skill. And we're gonna make it. And don't you go mistake me for a fool. I went to school for like 12 years or maybe more. But still, baby, still, after all these years, girl, you is my twin flame, and I'll always feel this way. Now ain't that the truth? Remember that one time I came home from work and I pulled a little prank on you. I was wearing nothing but my birthday suit. Girl, you is my gumdrop. Fetch pale water from the top of Chapel Hill. I say you could even meet my pa. You could even meet my mom. Girl, 'cause you're so chill. And we're gonna make it. And don't you go mistake me for a fool. I went to school for like 12 years or maybe more. But still, baby, still, after all these years, girl, you is my gumdrop. Bet you pale water from the top of Chapel Hill. I said you could even meet my pa. You could even meet my mom. Girl, 'cause you're so chill. That's still gonna breathe. Still, after all these years.
That's a way to support the show. Just send us your blood.
Donate to Grimerica. It'll feel real good. Donate to Grimerica. All will be right with the world. Donate to Grimerica. It'll feel real good. Donate to Grimerica. All will be right with the universe.
We could just start harvesting blood from our listeners and selling it.
You're gonna have to expand the igloo a bit.
That's a way to support the show. Just send us your blood. That's a way to support the show. Just send us your blood. That's a way to support the show. Just send us your blood.